Hello, everyone, and welcome to Season 3 of Crave Arts Presents The Future of Film, featuring intimate interviews with the best emerging filmmakers from around the world. My name is Tom Oliva, and I am co-founder and executive director of Crave Arts and the All-American High School Film Festival, dedicated to discovering, showcasing, and uniting the next generation of visual storytellers and content creators. Some quick updates from the All-American Bulletin Board as we gear up for our 10th annual festival in New York City. Our 2022 festival takes place this October. We're working hard to finalize the dates, and we should have those posted very, very soon. Submissions are currently open via Film Freeway, and submitting is free until March 4th. The final deadline is July 1st. Head over to hsfilmfest.com to get the latest news and updates about the 2022 festival, including our 2021 highlight reel, downloadable 2022 event planner, planning guides, and posters, because it's never too early to begin planning your all-American adventure. And if you plan on attending the fest in New York City, we highly recommend competing in our Film Invitational competitions, the world's premier on-site student filmmaking competitions in New York City. We offer a variety of authentic, real-world production experiences for student filmmakers and video production programs. Your chance to crew up and produce a short film in just 10 weeks. Registration opens in March. And finally, teachers, if you are looking for a great way to boost your curriculum and elevate and inspire your students, check out our video production resource community and roadshow, two terrific in-person or remote opportunities featuring lesson plans and interactive presentations based on our library of over 15,000 exemplary student films. More information can be found at hsfilmfest.com under our Education tab. I'm honestly not sure where to begin to describe today's special guest, Hudson Flynn. Perhaps the best place to start is that he appeared literally out of nowhere, in the interweb overnight, submitting 3 top-tier exemplary film submissions in 2021 as a graduating senior. A last-chance glimpse at a talent worthy of a much closer look. He had never submitted to us before, at least not that we were aware of, and yet there he was, immediately on the cusp of all-American domination. And this is what that looks like. 2 films nominated for Best Comedy, 2 films nominated for Best Screenplay, a Best Original Score nomination, a Best Direction nomination, winner of our coveted Audience Award, and winner of Best Overall Film. I mean, how does someone this overwhelmingly instinctive and developed as a storyteller just appear out of thin air with such a defined style and broad repertoire? Well, I suppose that's what we're here to find out today. Hudson's gifts as a storyteller humbled us, humbled me. His 3 films, Fork, Knife, and Chainsaw, a half-horror, half-dark comedy, Death by Handshake, an introspective pandemic comedy epitomizing and embracing his New York City roots, and Friday, a hyper-relevant teen tour de force, rich in depth of character, conflict, an immersive range of emotion, attention to delivery, and that elusive X factor, the ability to marry message and merit and the artistic bridge that helps us all travel to a place of profound growth. Discovering Hudson through this initial body of work prompted an overwhelming revelation of limitless potential. From the moment we first reviewed Friday, we could not shake the story. The hyper-relevant topic delivered from a fresh and potent perspective, the nimble adaptation of the nonlinear structure, the nuanced realism and depth of the script, the scope of distinct perspectives, the manipulative mastery of foreshadowing, the waves of dynamic emotions, the gravity of the tone, and of course, the undeniable impact of the message. I feel compelled to continue this compliment fest, but that wouldn't serve our true purposes here, to uncover Hudson's motivations, development, and process. So I'll leave you with this. What is Friday really about? Let's do a little checklist to reveal the depth I praise so highly. Is this story about high school? Check. Is this story about friendship and love and admiration and coming of age? Check. Is this story about personal insecurity and weakness, the kind that are real, that we all hide from the world? Check. Is this story about bullying and abuse and how cruel the world can be to those who don't fit in? Check. Is this story about resentment and fear and the terrible manifestations of personal pain? Check again. Is this story about gun violence and revenge and the innocent victims that these forces bring together? Check. Is this a story about friendship and love and just being a teenager, just trying to figure things out? Check. Is this story about a terrible, preventable tragedy and how a crippling flaw from an otherwise perfect human being changed the fate of so many others forever? Check. Is this story about our world and the overwhelming conflicts we face? You bet. And so much more. I am honored to be joined by Mr. Hudson Flynn today. Welcome, Hudson.
Thank you. I'm totally blushing right now.
Was the checklist too much? I couldn't stop. There's like so many things to check off.
Oh my God. Tom, I wish that I could write now like a really long intro about you. I feel like I have to like give that. That was such an experience to go through all of that.
Well, if I was going to have someone write me an intro, I would want it to be you. So, you know.
That's very kind of you. Okay, so now I have to get on it. Now I have homework.
No, I want you making movies. You don't need to write about me.
Oh my gosh. It's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about it.
Well, holy moly, man. You came out of nowhere. I'm not sure I've been this excited to dive deeper into who you are and what you do and how you do it. No pressure, of course. But let's just start with, how are you? What's up?
I'm all right. I was just thinking as you were doing this intro, I was like, I had a pretty bad cold this week. I was kind of sick, and I think the intro just like healed it. I think that was exactly what I needed.
So my next career is as a spiritual guru then.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that was the spirit and ego boost of the century just now. I'm all right. I'm at school. I'm prepping to do a film this spring semester that I'm really excited about and very nervous about too, because I'm still finding my people here. But yeah, everyone's been really nice, and it's so cool to be so constantly surrounded by like such talented people. It's just like there are people that are sort of quiet and like or just people you haven't met or talked to yet, and then they'll show their work in class and it just like smacks you in the face with how good it is. That's been really, really exciting about being at film school right now. So
I'm jealous.
I'm good.
Yeah, I love being a student. It's one of the things that you kind of lose as you get older, and I envy being in that position. Soak it in. I mean, nothing will ever be quite like that again, and you won't be the same again, and you're in the perfect place for it. So with that said, and we're going to get into more about school and this project that you talk about, but we're going to get the conversation flowing here. I think we're already flowing, but we got to do it just to be fair to the other people I've tortured. So this is our little personal portrait. In this quick reply exercise, I'll say a word or a quick question and just say the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay. Oh God,
no pressure again. All right, here we go. You love stories because?
Ooh. Because of the variety of how many of them there are.
Your favorite genre?
Oh God. Constantly changing, but right now it's suspense.
Okay. A writer's job is?
Oh, these are so good. Oh, shoot. A writer's job is to...
This is where you say to write and not answer this question, but no, to go.
Exactly.
And then I interrupt you as you're actually
You're so right. No. I mean, I'm glad that you did, because I don't think I had an end of the sentence I was about to start. I think a writer's job is to present the like foundation of the story. I think that everybody else after that is kind of a co-author as well. But yeah.
Being a New Yorker means?
Oh, everything. Being a New Yorker means everything. I don't know if I don't know if you could tell from the everything about me, but being a New Yorker is the most important thing to me and my growing up. I just love it.
It's stamped on everything that I've seen for sure.
100%.
All right, maybe these are a little easier. Collaboration.
Wonderful. The ultimate goal and a successful collaboration means a successful project. So
Networking.
you got to do it. I'm not super good at it, but I respect those who are, and I'm trying to get better.
Film school.
Great, exciting, and a fresh start as of right now.
The book on your bedside table.
Oh, that's a great. I think the literal answer to that question, not in my dorm, but in my apartment, is Catcher in the Rye.
Of course it is. Okay, and finally, the All-American High School Film Festival.
An explosion of creative people meeting each other, and like some of the greatest work I've ever seen in my life. Just like a crazy, life-changing, exciting experience that I was so honored to be a part of, and then I wish I had obviously utilized sooner. But it's just magnificent, and I've been recommending it to people since. I have a lot of filmmaking friends who are not out of high school yet, who have just been like, as soon as we got out of there, I've been like, people, you have to be submitting to this, because it was just such an exceptional experience. So, and that's why I'm so excited to talk more about it today.
Cool. Well, it's my baby, so it means the world to hear that. And
Yeah.
I absolutely, you can be an ambassador for us. And that's probably why at this point, we're just a few months into the submission period, and we're almost at 650 submissions already.
Wow.
It's insane. It's hard to keep up with, but it's worth it.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So, you had a pretty good year with All-American. And we're going to talk about that and your work, particularly Friday. I hope it's okay that I'm sort of honing in on that, because I have to hone in on something. But let's take a step back and discuss your experiences that got you to this point. When did you first start making movies, and why did you catch that bug?
I first started making, I don't know if these would count as movies, but like the first time I started actually getting into, like, without knowing I was doing it, getting into like editing and like actual story stuff, was in middle school. I had an iPod Touch, and my mom, I think maybe I had a phone then, actually. But actually, okay, sorry. I'm starting over, because the answer to this question is totally elementary school. I would basically, any class that had an option to like make a video instead of write an essay, I was all in on that. And the only reason they kept letting me do it is because I would put a ridiculous amount of time into the video, and it wasn't just like a half-assed way to get out of essay writing. I think like the earliest thing I can remember is there was this book called There's a Boy in the Girl's Bathroom. And it was like just like a really funny, like awkward school novel. And as an assignment, I like made a scene from it on my phone. And I like, my mom was so nice and like so supportive of it. She like brought craft services, and like everybody had like a costume.
You had
it
a
was
legit
really fun.
Elementary school production.
Exactly. Yeah. But I was really excited about it. And it's funny thing, I haven't thought about this in so long, but like in retrospect, I was so serious about it. And I like had a whole talk with my cast. I was like, all right, guys, like, thank you so much for being here. This is the first step in like a journey we're going to take together. So anyway, I'd say elementary school, but,
has your pep talk changed since that
100%.
first production? I bet you're still using the same one.
No, well, as I was saying that, I thought, actually, I think fourth grade me would probably be a better person to give a pep talk than I am right now. So I should definitely use some reflection on that. But
and were the craft services, like, was it like age appropriate? Was it like mac and cheese and chicken nuggets and like
100%, like apple slices? Yeah, no,
that's
totally. Yeah, but then but I always wanted to be an actor growing up, because that's what my mother is an actress, and my dad's a director who started as an actor. He's a theater director now, and so and I'm very close with my parents, so I've seen them as role models for a very long time. So I wanted to be an actor for a while, and then I was touring high schools. And I went to my high school, Frank Sinatra. I went to the open house before I had even applied. And they were like, okay, people who are interested in drama are going to come over here. And people who want to do the film program can come over here. And I was like, what does that mean? I was like, I don't understand. Why is there like a film program? You can't like make that a class, right? My dad was like, it's totally a class. And I was like, well, then why don't we go over there? And so we did. And it just like, everybody said all the right things. I was like so excited about all of it, and it became my first choice. And I'm really lucky that I got to spend time there. But yeah, that was, I'd say the shift when I actually decided to like start making stuff was going to school for film, for sure.
And did you keep up with the acting as well? I mean, I know you're in some of your own films.
Yeah, sort of. It became less of a priority and more like all of the films that I submitted to All American were made during the pandemic, which meant less actors. So it was lucky that like my parents act and that like I could step in for stuff. But it became more of like a fun hobby and less of a passion. I think yeah, I think it's something that I have a lot of friends who are filmmakers who will be like, will you come do this thing? And I'm like, sure. I don't dislike it, but it's definitely not as much of a priority as it was when I was a kid.
Well, I mean, nothing against any of the performances, which, I think were fantastic, but yeah, I think you went the right direction, and I'm glad that you did.
Yeah.
So I think we need to stay on that for a second, though, just because of who our audience is. And does your experience, or did your experience with acting and sort of, some knowledge that you had there, whether it's from your parents or from your own experiences, did that help you as a filmmaker? Does that help you as a filmmaker? And if so, in what ways?
Yes, I'd like to think so. It's funny, as a kid, I thought of this earlier when I was answering the question before. As a kid, I always said that I want to be an actor and then a director, like my dad was, because I thought like, oh, when you're an actor, you can like understand what all of your actors are going through once you become a director. And technically I did that. It just happened a lot faster than I thought. Yeah, I think that yeah, one of the biggest things that I'm working on is figuring out how to communicate better with my casts and my crew, and just finding the balance between getting the job done and also just having a really good time. And so I think that when I first started doing film, especially in high school, I was just all about the product and like, you cannot be off task. Like, can we just get this done? And I think that it took like going to summer camp and acting there during the summers of my high school years to kind of realize like, oh, well, this should be really pleasant for everybody, and you don't need to just like bark orders. Not that I was like a dictator on set, but I was definitely
maybe a little too focused.
100%. Yeah, that's a very kind way of putting it.
Yeah.
But I think that definitely helped me as a filmmaker, because now I try to prioritize the experience rather than what we get done. And I actually think that it makes the product better when everybody's having a good time. So.
Yeah, and you hear that from the industry, right? That actors want to work with directors who understand how to be kind and get the job done, that are civil and human on set. And I think it's really important. And honestly, that's anything. That's life, right? It's being in a position of leadership and understanding what good leadership actually looks like. And I struggle with it all the time. I mean, producing a live event in New York City, there's a ton of pressure and a ton of moving parts, and your instinct is to just be like, this, and forget that you're actually dealing with people. And when you do, things don't go as well. And so I think sometimes it's better to to find that casual balance, right, where you can enjoy yourself and still get the job done. And maybe you sacrifice a little bit on the job, but
yeah,
I think
absolutely.
You gain something much greater. So why do you do this? Like, what is it about making movies that you find so interesting? Because it's really hard, and the kind that you make and the quality of the kind that you make and the depth, it's harder. So
yeah,
what's the deal? Why do you like this?
I think there's something just really satisfying to I don't know. This is going to sound more vague than I mean it to, but I think there's something really, really satisfying and gratifying to being in a room with a group of people and like creating a circumstance or a world that like wasn't there before, if that makes sense. Like as a writer, I get a lot of joy from putting words in other people's mouths and just like hearing how it works and then changing and being like, okay, well that sounds more awkward, so why don't we go with this? Like on Friday, actually, I tell this story to a lot of people, but I the first time that I ever like heard my own dialogue and uh and heard it just presented so like just naturally and organically was on set of Friday, because I'm very grateful for all of the friends that volunteered to be a part of my films. But Friday
And
was
they
really,
do an amazing job. They're not professionals.
well, Friday was the first one where those are professional actors, and they're magnificent. And I didn't know a good chunk of them going in. I had a friend who sort of served as a casting director, and so it was really a very lucky thing that they all jumped in as hard as they did. And we were shooting the scene in the cafeteria, and I was talking to my DP just I think about how we were going to shoot the coverage, because there was a big window in our cafeteria. We were having a whole conflict with like trying to bounce the light, but while doing that, I just overheard my two lead actors talking, and I was like, oh, okay, good. They're like getting along, like they're like catching up and stuff. And I went over to interrupt them to say we were going to start. And as I did, I overheard. I was like, what were you guys just saying? They were like, no, we were just running the scene. And I was like, so fascinated by that, and I got so excited because I was like, I was not listening to the words. I was just listening to like the general
cadence,
rhythm and cadence of what was happening behind me. And so I was so psyched by how normal it felt. And they're both just, it was sort of a great thing that their first scene together was that, because it's sort of like a beautifully awkward teen conversation, I guess, where they're sort of flirting and sort of not. And I think that Ella Stiller and Jack Clark, who were the actors in that, they both their chemistry was just really great. But I remember that day just kind of freaking out that had happened in front of me. Anyway, that's a long answer, but I think that just like I don't just mean creating something out of nothing, like really being able to build like a detailed and layered story or world, or honestly just conversation out of thin air is really, really exciting to me. And yeah.
It's something that I preach and teach wherever I go. That's one of the things I just love about film, cinema, movies, whatever you want to call it, that you are, as a viewer, stepping into a world that could take you anywhere. And you're talking about the part that happens before that as the writer, you're crafting that world, for the viewer. And it's just such a fascinating thing. And the thing that makes film so elevated to me is that it has so many moving parts, right? There's a little bit of everything involved between the artistry of the frame and those decisions and the words and the mouths and the tone that comes in from the score and just all of these little pieces. You are really creating a world that didn't exist before. And I find it incredibly fascinating. And as someone who watches thousands of student films every year, like being invited into all of those worlds, and let's be honest, some of them are not very good or very interesting. But when we open one, and when we open Friday, who knows? I don't remember. It was like a Wednesday afternoon or Sunday night. Whenever I opened your submission up, we know immediately, like, holy cow, this is going to be something special, and then we get to enjoy that ride. I was just teaching your film Friday in Alabama last week.
Really?
Yeah, that happens. So you're out there, and I always make the whether it's a small classroom setting or a huge auditorium filled with hundreds, I always make the audience clap, and I always hope that the filmmaker, wherever they are, can hear it. So if you felt like a little vibe last week, that was it.
Thanks, man. That really means a lot. I didn't know that you do that.
Oh yeah, it's part of the roadshow, and your film offers so much to teach and to help others grow their craft. What was your process like? This isn't even the next question I wanted, but I had a feeling this conversation was going to be this way. What was your process for Friday? I mean, for those of you who haven't seen it that are listening, there's going to be a link in the description. It's must see TV. Friday is a film. I mean, I went through the list, so I don't need to regurgitate. But it's a film about so many things. But at the core, it's a film about high schoolers, very real people that you know, people like you, and it's about gun violence. It's about a horrible tragedy, which makes it certainly relevant to our times. Tell me, like, where did the idea come from, and then how did you take it from wherever that idea came from? Walk me through the entire thing to when you submitted it to us.
Oof.
I'll help you. I'll help you stay organized. It's my job.
Yeah, thank you. Please do. So I technically, do you want me to start with like writing it?
Yeah. Why did you want to tell this story? Where did it come from? Like, were you watching the news and some awful tragedy came across the screen like we see too often?
So that and so I started technically writing the story / script that became Friday in 7th grade. I was so I like you said, we were just sort of, it was a time where I mean, when aren't we? But it was a time when we were so surrounded by all of those headlines. And I also think that middle school is a kind of fascinating transition where you learn of all of this stuff in the news and have to grapple with the fact that, like, it's not that it's just starting to happen now, it's been happening and you've just been like a kid the whole time. So that was a really fascinating time where my brain kind of opened up to the rest of the world. And my school had a sort of threat. Nothing, thank God, nothing that became too serious, but an email saying some pretty nasty stuff was sent to one of my classes, and the NYPD classified it as a threat. And so the next day, it was not my class. It was like 701, and I was in like class 702 or something. And so I didn't know about it until I got to school the next day, and the school was like swimming with police officers, and no students were there. And so I think it was like me and 2 or 3 other people in most of my classes, and it was really terrifying. And it was sort of just like a shock to the system as soon as I walked in the building. Unfortunately, that school that I went to has had further threats since, and from what I've heard, they don't handle them quite well. But I sort of, I had this idea for a story about a kid who has a dream about this scenario of a school shooting where he's crying before anybody else is, and he doesn't know why. And then he wakes up like right as anything's about to happen. And then and then the next day he like goes into school and tells a friend about it. He goes to school and he tells a friend about it. And then I think there was something with like the shooter having like a tattoo, and he sees somebody with that tattoo at school the next day. And that's what causes him to like sit down and start crying before anybody else. Just like that sort of cycle thing. That it's like the bare bone skeleton that's in Friday. That's something I wrote in 7th grade. And I recently was able to find this like messy attempt at a script format from 2017. That's like me trying to come up with this thing. But yeah, that was like the origin of the idea. And it sort of went back and forth for like a really long time. And then I had Get Out was like a huge inspiration to me just as a filmmaker of like, oh, wow, this is an incredible way to not only tell a fascinating story on the surface, but also use our current events and a lot of fascinating symbolism and metaphors about what's going on in our world so poignantly. And I don't know if poignantly is a word, but I hope it is. And brilliantly. And that just, I I had never had an experience where I had learned so much more every time I watched the movie over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
Like that movie, once you've seen it once, the next watch will never be the same. Like once you know all of the information from that first watch, you will not ever stop noticing things as you continue watching it. And it just blew my mind that way. And so I think the bumpy side of writing this was in presenting a lot of drafts to my teachers at school. I was really desperate to be like subliminal, have that like under the radar symbolism and stuff. And in trying to do that, it lacked any strength as a story. And so it was kind of like an embarrassing, messy thing where I'd think that I was doing something brilliant. There were like weird, awkward biblical references in it. Like I had no idea what I was really trying to do.
You were trying too hard.
And exactly. 100% I was trying too hard. Because I was trying to I was trying to tell the story from a place of like a brilliant Hollywood screenwriter instead of from the place of a high schooler. And I think that
you only know one of those two places. You probably should start there. And
yeah.
Well, I'm glad it survived that, because I think a lot of scripts probably don't. And yet everything you're talking about, all of that subtext is still in it. It's just in it in the right ways.
Right. So I'm glad to hear you say that.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, that's a huge part of the reason I teach it, and a huge part of why it won, because again, of those layers and depth. Just to make what you're saying make sense, or to show you that it is still there. I'm teaching this in Alabama, and I've seen the film many times. And you said with Get Out, you'll never see it the same. You're always going to see more things. Well, I mean, sure, on a different scale, but it's really true for your films too, because I'm watching them more, and then I'm watching them to teach them. So I watch them in a different way, right? I'm watching them to see what they can offer to people so that they can build their own stories with those techniques. And I'm screening it in Alabama, and basically I'm defending my choice, right? Our choice to award this film. And I hear Hitch, is that his name? The young protege?
Yeah, that's right.
So he is speaking to Sam in the hallway in the beginning of the film, and he is he's talking about, well, you're going to marry this girl, and I'm going to come to the wedding, and I'm going to wear a tie. And I'd never made the connection between that early line and how it foreshadows him putting on the tie at the end where you're just devastated, especially for him, because he's just as much an innocent victim as the people who die. Sorry to ruin the movie, everyone. And
I mean, that's right.
But I mean, he wants to be going to a wedding, and the reality is he's going to a funeral for his friends at the end. And that's what I mean. Like, you did that, but you just did it in a real way that was grounded in your own experience. So I want you to keep going. That seriously means a lot. That's my favorite thing to kind of look for whenever anybody's watching it in front of me is like, did they catch it?
Because I'm grateful that it works without knowing that as well. But for the people that do catch it, it's really kind of an exciting thing to watch them kind of discover that. I had a friend who caught it on the first watch, which doesn't happen a lot. Like, it's not a thing that you're 100%
it's a line that kind of breezes by.
But I had a friend who caught it on the first watch, and there's like no better feeling than like seeing your work pay off that way. So I love when people spot that. But this movie it means so much to me, just because it's kind of like, it's the little movie that could. Like, there was that rough patch in the writing, and then it didn't get greenlit at my school. And so I made it in my own time. It didn't get greenlit, and so I was editor and script supervisor on a friend of mine's film, which turned out to be fantastic as well. So it's not like it's not like the time wasn't well spent, but I basically had to come in on weekends and like schedule all of my own shoots with like all of these extras in the hallway, and like really trying to make it work. And that doesn't mean I didn't have the help of my school, but it was definitely less supported than the rest of the projects in the classroom, just because some of them go along with the organization of the curriculum, and then some of them are left to me to try and scramble and figure out at 4 a.m.
I mean, back to something we were saying earlier, though. You must have, like, now that this film is, well, first of all, I'm sure when everyone saw it, they were like, man, we probably should have greenlit that one. And then when you've received such high praise for it from, I would imagine, not just us and other places and people as well, again, it must have been like, yeah, probably, but you don't know. I mean, you don't know when you're reading scripts sometimes.
Yeah, no, of course. I completely understood I mean, you also have to understand that these are my film teachers who read some really horrible drafts of this film.
Fair
So
enough.
I think that when they saw one that was like, oh, he went from not making that much sense to making sense, it was like not that big a leap. And I totally understand where their choice came from.
Yep.
But I'm grateful that they did give me, I was able to use the school's equipment, and my film teachers had to come in on those weekends that I was filming. So they were very generous in giving that time. But yeah, we finally got to make it when it wasn't greenlit, and we shot all the way up until March 1st of 2020. And then I said, okay, I'll be in touch in a couple weeks with our next shooting dates. And then we had to wait for months. I thought that it was done. I was like, okay, so that sucks because this thing I've been writing since 7th grade is finally happening, and it's not happening.
Did you make Death by Handshake in between?
I made everything I submitted to All American besides Friday in between making Friday. So Death by Handshake, Fork, Knife, and Chainsaw. Yep. This other one called Personal Narrative, and like all of these different things. Yeah, I was. Those were all of the things that I made for my school curriculum while trying to finish this film that should have been done in May or June of 2020. So it was a lot of it was a lot of fun making that much at one time, but it was a lot of mixing and matching because it was like, okay, let's try and figure out. I said to my mom as soon as schools closed, I was like, my whole cast is going through puberty. Like I can't just wait for. I can't just wait for everybody. Like everyone's gonna look different so quickly. We're changing so quickly. It's funny. I look at behind the scenes photos of when we were filming in February of 2020, and I already look so different than how I look when we were finishing shooting in April of 2021.
I mean, it's a reality of being a young filmmaker writing stories 100%. About young people. Wow, continuity at a whole nother level.
Yeah, big time. It was just a lot of really small things we had to look out for, and there was some really creative problem solving that had to happen. I had filmed everything that happens in the school and nothing else.
Oh, okay.
And so and the scene on the basketball court was supposed to be in the school gym. And there were just a lot of different adjustments that were this can be outside now, or this can be done separately. There's one shot that I don't think anybody spots, which I'm very grateful for, of Sam at the piano that's on a green screen in my living room, just trying to stitch things. So it was a lot of I've never been more grateful to a group of people than I am to the people that worked on Friday, because they signed up for a month of work and ended up committing to it for almost 2 years. And it just means so much that everyone was willing to come back after so long. My DP who had already graduated, who was a year ahead of me in school, came back to finish shooting the whole thing. This young woman named Livia, who's brilliant. And I was very fortunate to have that group of people who were so committed to getting it done.
It's really interesting to get this kind of perspective on it, because I think if I do have one criticism, and if there's one criticism, that I've heard about the film, it's the inconsistency of the imagery or cinematography, right? And now
100%.
I just learned the reason for that. And it makes perfect sense. You're shooting at completely different times. You're shooting at completely different places than maybe you intended. You're using the green screen, which now I'm going to have to go back and look for. But I'm pretty sure I know where it is, because, again, that's something that I have to defend when I'm praising this film. And my commentary is always, that doesn't matter because the story's so good and because the impact is so deep. But that is an issue, and you overcame it because it doesn't matter. And I think that's the beauty of story, right? And the beauty of your gifts. And I think obviously the perseverance of your team has to be attributed to your leadership as well. And I'm sure that they're fantastic people and they deserve that credit as well. But it's amazing to even just hear the sort of pandemic journey that an artist had to endure. And yet you made all these awesome things in between. I mean, Death by Handshake to win Audience Award is no small feat. And it's a personal favorite of mine as well. We don't do that. We don't give multiple awards to one person. We spread the wealth because we're dealing with high school students, and we want as many people to be recognized. But that film is so freaking funny. And it's and it's funny because it's New York, and because it's something we can all relate to, even though it's very site specific. Wow, it's amazing to hear sort of all of that, and it's also amazing how like literally the pandemic seems to take over every episode of this show, because we kind of started it during it, and it's been a really tough time for artists. But it's great to know that you fought through it. So we'll stick with it a little bit more here. So you're at this point where you have this idea, and the idea brews for a long time, and you have to make it on your own. Two things. What happens after the idea? Or you just keep tinkering? Is it like, would you write characters first? Like, what's your next part of that process? Because I think a lot of people are going to look up to you for this story, and they're going to want to emulate it, and that's, look, I could say that about a bunch of the films this year and every year, but it's true. Yeah. There's some really special things that happen in this script. I'd like to know like how you do that from point A to point B. And then I'd like to know if the story changed at all while you had that time off.
Yeah. Thank you so much for saying all of that. I really like, it just means a lot because of how long it took to make this thing happen. When you say stuff like that, I'm touched by it, but it's weird. The process that I had for Friday is not, I don't think I have a process yet that I'm like super committed to, because I end up sort of thinking I do every time I start a script, and then it becoming a whole different beast. But Friday was, it basically was, I don't think I thought of it this way, but looking back, it was a lot of that like wanting to do the subliminal thing, and then having to kind of completely let go of that after realizing that's not how to write a script. Mm-hmm. And only holding on to the parts of that I actually did feel were strong. Like I liked the dream. I had the tie thing from another script that I never finished, that I was like, that's going to come in here, and I'm going to hold on to these two things. And then I watched Gus Van Sant's Elephant. Mm-hmm. From 2003, and that it had been recommended to me from a film teacher of mine after reading one of the really bad drafts of the script. He was like, you should watch Elephant, just because it's a high school movie about tragedy,
and it's great. Yeah,
it's magnificent. It's really like, and if anyone who's listening to this hasn't seen it, I highly recommend sitting through it. And the reason I say sitting through it is because when you start it, you really have no idea what's happening. Like it's a commitment, because it's specifically about nothing, which kind of makes it about everything. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of one of the most mind-blowing parts of that movie, which it really kind of put everything in perspective that I needed it to. 'Cause you follow all these characters through an ordinary day of high school until it stops being that. And so basically I watched that, and then a whole new, within I think an hour of watching it, a whole other story of what we have now came through. Like there wasn't, what I had before was like this kid, and the plot points that stayed the same were, and then I got rid of the mom. It was this lead kid, and he would talk to his mom about the dream he had in the morning, and then he'd go to school and talk to his like funny best friend about it, and then the thing would happen. And it was a lot of messy stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And then from Elephant, I was sort of able to carve out this like ensemble idea of like, what if you're watching like a really simple, fun high school coming of age rom-com, and then reality kind of takes over.
It's so much more powerful that way, right? Because first of all, you're showing and not telling. You're not. There's all of the emotion comes from the attachment, but with these relationships, and the way that you give just this nice little portrait of each character. We know just enough, and obviously we know everything we need to know is really about how they inform Sam, right? Because we're following him, and it works so well that way, because you care about the characters because they're just doing everyday things, and they're normal and they're likable. Wow, that's amazing. I mean, you just like created a college course. We could do like a whole thing on how those all kind of line up to help make this movie what it is.
Well, I mean, that's the Gus Van Sant of it all. The way that he it's part of what you just said of like how the reason you care about them is because they're just doing everyday things.
Yep.
Like that's what Elephant gave to me. I was really, I also, it hit hard just as a student who was in high school trying to make this thing. Just that like it really, really well reflected the world around me. And I watched it with my dad, and he was pointing out things that he's a huge inspiration to me, my dad. And he remains a role model just because of how observant he is of different things whenever we're watching stuff together. He's a role model for a lot of other reasons. But I'm like hearing him listening to this being like, got it, just because I observe things. Cool. Thanks, Hudson. But I am but he's a big role model to me in that way too, because we'll be watching anything and he'll just pop in with like, oh, and look at that. And I'll be like, oh, God.
Duh.
Like,
yeah.
How you just see that? Like he just pays such specific attention so easily to everything. But he clocked that like the school in Elephant, the geography of it and like everything you walk past is so fragile. Like it's a school that's made of so many glass windows and there's so many trophy cases and there's just so many things that like, for those who haven't seen it, like when you're watching the film, there's a point where you do understand that it is about a school shooting and like there or just some sort of threat. And so visually, you're watching so many fragile things that could be impacted by whatever's about to happen. On top of the fact that like the very subtle story is giving you all of these sort of fascinating clues of just like and context as to what's going on. So yeah, it's just really stuff like that really helped me sort of piece together like how I wanted to make that work in my own film. Like there were smaller stuff came in from there. Like once I realized who the characters were and what I wanted to do with them, then I sort of realized the kind of formula of like, okay, we're gonna start morning of, and then we'll go back throughout the week. And I like the idea of like the something I tried to focus on for a while was that the first scene that's like on that Friday morning of everyone talking in the hallway is like almost everything they say is like about their futures, sort of like nothing really specifically, but like talking about how Hitch is going to beat Sam in the basketball game when he's in college, and like, and Agnes is only going to be called Agnes when she's in a retirement home, and like it's a name for an old lady. Just all of this stuff that's like so like just something that like without beating you over the head with it kind of tells you these people have their whole lives ahead of them.
Yeah. And it's the same thing. And it's just really funny. You're talking about this. And in my last conversation, my last interview, we were talking about how the dangers of watching films. And this particular filmmaker was saying like he had to stop watching so much because it was hurting his own work. And yet
that can happen too.
Of course. But yet you're illuminating the exact opposite scenario where you found incredible inspiration that really informed your work in a positive way and improved it. I'm just thinking of the shot, when things are really getting tense, where you just cut to the flag, and it's just it's so lonely. I don't know if it's purposeful, but the flag isn't like completely unfurled. It's like a little bit like off on the pole, like and it's like not perfect America, and yet you without saying anything, with the tone already available, you're just like, let's take a second and look at this flag as and how it relates. I mean, you're allowing me to make all those connections, which is the most important thing to do, right? Because then I have ownership and I'm processing all of it, and it's like this devastating, lonely flag shot, and it lingers just long enough, and it's so...
I love how you're saying that, the lonely flag. I hadn't thought about that part. Yeah, I really... The lonely flag, I like that a lot. It's interesting because obviously there was a lot of intention behind putting that shot of the flag there, because what's kind of amazing is... when we had, I think that's a freeze frame from a shot where we pan down from the flag to Sam running in from the hallway. That I put in. I edited Friday as well because I really like editing. So I think that's what I did there. I think I don't remember us getting just like a standalone shot of the flag, but I know that I wanted it in there because what's kind of amazing is like we didn't place it. Like that was just in my school because that's how schools are. And so I was kind of fascinated by like, sort of heartbroken by the idea of like, how many schools where these horrible tragedies take place, like are surrounded by the American flag every time it happens. You know what I mean? Like there's so much patriotism just visually around every single high school. It's like we all have a flagpole and we all have a something. Like I that was just sort of a fascinating observation. And so yeah, and the flags are sort of everywhere. They're like in every classroom, and I never really realized that until making the film. There was even one moment where the actor who plays the shooter, this kid who's also a fantastic filmmaker, named Alex Koyak, who's a friend of mine. There was one point where we were filming at a different location, and there was just there was a flag like the one in the shot that was just like on the floor in the hallway, and we were approaching. I was about to block him, and he goes, this isn't subtle, right? Like this isn't where. And I was like, no, I didn't put that there. We're gonna move that out of the way. But like they're everywhere.
Yeah.
It's just so yeah, we wanted to find different ways to work it in there. But I think that shot where it pans down from the flag was Livia's idea. And it was sort of a brilliant kind of observation. But yeah, I love the best part of making a movie like this as well is like hearing the things that you didn't know you did. Like something like that is so like, yeah, no, I totally,
of course.
Absolutely, of course. No, but that's part of what I love is like there's
happy accidents,
there's all of these happy accidents, and also there's kind of like I said before is like the writer is laying down a base and a foundation for what the story is going to be, and then a director and an editor, and sometimes the actors can sort of become different co-authors of how the story is presented, and then the last author is you, right? Like the way that the audience is interpreting your work. Like there's things in this movie that affect people that I never intended to, but because of certain experiences or certain knowledge that I didn't have, like it all ends up connecting in a way that is a happy accident, but also is just fascinating as a filmmaker to see how audiences can connect those dots for themselves. That's really amazing to me.
And to your credit, it, whether intentional or not, there's so much room to breathe in this film, which is definitely a student film killer. Not having enough of that, that it really allows the viewer to be an author as well. And I think that's so important, especially in a film that is this real, and a story that is this real and this heartbreaking. We need to feel that ownership. And identification, and that room to breathe is what allows us the time to process that while enjoying it. So you just mentioned one of your favorite parts, which was going to be one of my next questions, because I want to get to so much more, and we could talk about Friday for a week, and I want to, but we also have to leave some things for people to discover, because folks, there are a lot more layers than we've gotten to. So one of your favorite parts is that it takes on a life of its own, and there are those things that happen, whether they're kind of you're doing and you don't even realize it, maybe just by picking the palette of the setting, and it being so real that it's going to have that kind of iconography in place, and you just stumble upon it, or whether it is just by chance. What's your least favorite part? What's the hardest part of making a movie that you just have to grind through? This one or any one?
On a really practical level, I there's a lot of people that are much better at an individual job than I am, but it's also hard to get people my age to commit to doing that job when they're not being paid or anything, which is entirely understandable. But the thing that I'm very bad at is a sound mix, and that is just the hardest thing to sit through and do. And I'm very grateful that I had this friend of mine named Simon Kaskovich, who's fantastic at it and ended up doing a really, really good job compared to where it was before. So that's just like kind of the pain in the neck, boring answer. But I think the hardest part, just as like a creative, is I don't know. Specific to Friday, the hardest part was sitting and waiting to see if we could still make the movie. You know what I mean? Like, depending on how long that wait could have been, we might not have been able to pick up without, there's moments where you watch it and you're like, oh, this is kind of inconsistent, but it doesn't bother you that much. Like if it had been maybe 2 more months of waiting, who knows how different everything would have been. So it was a lot of it was a lot of sitting there going like, well, I want to start planning in case we do get to do this, but if we don't, that's going to suck. And also like with what we had shot already in the school, you know, if you think about the stuff that happens in the school building, it's the very beginning and the very end.
It's
and
true.
There's not much to piece together there, because all I wanted to do, the thing I kept saying to my mom is like, I wish that I had been sent into quarantine with all the footage so I could like edit the crap out of like every different idea of a rough cut into this. I'd have so much to do. And I only had like the setup, and I had like a little bit of setup and a little bit of, and like the big ending, and that's it. And so there's not a lot of ways to connect those dots. And so it was just, it was really scary to sit and just think like, well, these people work their butts off. And I made a little YouTube link for the cast and crew and like their families to watch or something. That was like the first 5 minutes. That was like, here's the first 5. And it didn't even have, it's not even what the first 5 minutes are now, because we hadn't shot any of the last thing that we shot was everyone getting ready. Like the opening shots of the film were the last thing we got to. Those were like March and April of 2021. So, and I knew what I had wanted it to be. You know what I mean? Like I knew I wanted to open on him washing his face, and I knew like we wanted people brushing their teeth or whatever, like all of these different things. But it took a while to get to that. So the first 5 minutes were just like starting from them walking into the hallway to, I think, the end of the conversation in the cafeteria. And I was like, that's all I got for you. It's just the rom-com part without any of the depth. But I hope that you like it. Like it was just scary to think that the part of this that we had was pretty simple on the surface without knowing what it gets to. And I really wanted my crew to, and my cast and crew to be, oh, sorry, I was getting a call. I really wanted my cast and crew to be proud of the work they did and get credit for doing such like brave and nuanced stuff that they did in this movie. And so, yeah, I was anxious about it.
And I think it's something that, you know, our community can take away from that is that you took care of your crew. You kept communicating with them. You helped them sort of take ownership of the project by keeping them in the loop and giving them what you could. And I think that's really what leadership is. I mean, because you knew that you needed them, and obviously you cared about them, right? And you cared about their experience in making this film with you just as much as you cared about making it. And that is what we were talking about at the beginning. So, you know, maybe your instincts really have evolved and matured, because that's probably a big part of what made it work in the end too. And it's an incredible story and journey, like what it took to make this movie. And I think it's cool. I hope people listen to this, even though we sort of ruined the whole movie and gave everything away. But I hope that you now get to watch it through that lens. And you know, you'll probably be a little too keen, and you might miss some stuff in the story, but you'll be like, oh, I get it now. Like this had to be filmed then. And that's great. Yeah. I mean, look, hey, I'm super happy it turned out well, because otherwise we wouldn't have met and we wouldn't have had this great film to showcase to our community. But perhaps more importantly, man, you must have learned so much from that process, and you were able to overcome it. And I think that is a lesson worth learning, even if this thing, you know, never saw the light of day, which I'm very glad it did. And I think it's an important movie for a lot of people to watch, regardless of age. You know, it really has the ability to make an impact and to evoke change.
Thank you. That really does mean the world to me. And I'm really grateful that it saw the light of day as well. But even if it hadn't, like you said, it's maybe one of the most educational experiences I've ever had in my life, just because I learned about myself so much as mainly as like a communicator. Mm-hmm. I think I just realized, like, it's funny. I was forced to work with a lot of people in the beginning of high school, and it's not their fault, but like who weren't as interested in doing it, just because it would be like acting students who were like told to go be in a student film. Mm-hmm. And they'd be like, I guess I'll do this. And I totally get it. But Friday was the first time that I had worked with a crew that was like, everyone was on board. And it was the most like breath of fresh air experience ever. And so I'm just so grateful for those people because they really kind of like opened my whole world up to how you can have fun while making. I mean, if we found time to have like a really good time making as dark a movie as this is,
Right.
like then there's then there's kind of no exception for anything else. Like now I really know how to sort of walk that line, I think.
But that's what makes the movie work. And that is such a teachable thing for me is, yes, it's a very dark concept, but there's plenty of light. And it's that balance, it's that contrast that makes the dark have the impact, right? Because if you didn't have these characters so full of light, whether it's the sassy Agnes, right, who we barely know. I mean, we know nothing about her, but we know everything we need to know. And that's good writing. Whether it's her, but she's full of that sassy light. And then you've got all these other characters who are super positive and super real and just doing normal things. And it's that vibrancy that creates a connection that's then more palpable when tragedy strikes. And so I could see how you could have fun because more than half the movie is actually in a place full of light and love and, those kind of sweet, innocent, brutal coming of age lessons that we all have to learn. All right, we're going to talk about this all day to the point where we learn nothing else about you. So I'm going to move on, regrettably. Okay. So you're at school right now. You're at Purchase, SUNY Purchase. I am. And where is that for people who don't know?
That's it's basically in White Plains, New York. I think the town is called Purchase. Actually, I know that. It's called Purchase, but like there's nothing else in Purchase but the campus of Purchase. And then right next to us is like Connecticut and White Plains, New York.
So I would imagine you had some options for where you could go, a man of your talents. And okay, regardless, why Purchase and why film school? We get that question a lot. And in this particular thing that we do, you do have the option to not go that route and still find success. And I've learned very intimately that there are sort of two different kinds of filmmaker, and that's such a broad term. Like, people interested in this field, and for some of them, it's like film school is not an option, and then for others, it's like a necessity. So why Purchase, and where do you fall?
Purchase because it's the perfect distance from home because it's far away enough for me to be living my own sort of independent life. But if there's ever a need for me to head home and check in on my family and anything, it's not too far. But also, they're known for a pretty fantastic film program. And when I was looking into it, I was just so excited by all of there was something that was said up top coming here that I think really describes it really well, which is there's this philosophy that they go by that where you can just dare to fail, which I love. Like everyone is taking huge risks and 100% prepared to fall flat on their face. Like instead of being competitive, we're collaborative with, I think there is a little bit of competition, but in all the right ways. Like I don't think there's anyone actually trying to sabotage one another. I think it's just an exciting thing to see like, oh, well, I'm doing this over here. Like, what are you doing over there? But I think we all have such a profound respect for each other. I mean, I won't lie to you, I'm very intimidated by so many of my classmates because they're just all so gifted in so many ways. And so that's been a really exciting thing too, to just like talk about, oh, well, you do this really well. Like, I think maybe I do this really well, but I want to see how you do this. And all of these kind of fascinating, creative conversations.
I mean, I want to go. Really lucky. It sounds like so much. It sounds amazing. Yeah.
It's really great. I'm really lucky to be with this group of such like amazing people. And I'm hoping to make friends with more of them because it's still sort of early, but I'm trying to know everybody. But also the other thing is there's a philosophy of dare to fail, and also something that they said, which I thought was really poignant, was like, they have great equipment and resources, but they said like, I'm sure you can go to another school and find like an even better amount of resources or equipment and stuff. But part of why we do this is because of the way that we communicate here. Like that's a huge part of how we teach and how you'll learn is communication at this school. And the whole philosophy is think wide open here. That's like their whole entire tagline. So anyway, it just felt like a very open and creative space to continue. And for why film school, it just made sense to kind of continue my film education, because I took 4 years of film in high school, and there was a second there where I was very angry at the education system, and I thought I'm never going to go to school after high school ever, and I'm just going to start right from there. But I really, I think college also serves as a really great like transitional period where you can go from being a teen to like a mini adult to an adult and be kind of ready for the world. And I'm kind of grateful that I have that breathing room. So you know, if I can have a transition as a person where I can have time to feel comfortable going into the world as my own person and also study the thing that I'm obsessed with the whole time, that's a win-win for me.
I love it. I love it.
I'm happy to be here.
It sounds like you found a great home, and that's really some great insight into what your experience has been like. I want to take it just a tiny step further. And
Sure.
I know you're still sort of new to the experience, but has there been a specific class, or even better, probably like an assignment that you've had so far that you found really interesting, or does it not work that way? I like to give folks that are listening, you know, in high school, like, here's a little glimpse.
Yeah.
You just described college. Like, I would be going like tomorrow if I could, because it just sounded so exciting, but like a little bit closer look.
Yeah, I think all of the classes are sort of fascinating. I mean, I'm in this film program, something that I'm really lucky about is you're not allowed to take any other classes outside of the film program your first semester. So you're just totally immersed in what you're doing. And that's been awesome. As for assignments, well, there were a couple just like pinch me assignments at the beginning where I was like, this is homework.
Yeah.
Or like, that was like a crazy thing. Like, I wish that more interesting assignments were coming to mind. But like we had to read the screenplay for Thelma and Louise. And, or then there was another time where we had to like analyze the movie M, which I really, really enjoy. And just like I'm really enjoying all of my classes. I don't know if I could pick one, but yeah, there's just been so many different assignments that I'm like, oh, got it. Like when I chose to study this, that means that this is the homework.
This is like literally what I do.
It's a lot of stuff. Yeah, it's a lot of stuff I just enjoyed doing like as a hobby in high school. So the fact that I'm getting a grade for it is such a win.
Yeah, and recommendations you might not have otherwise considered and all that kind of cool
100%.
stuff.
Yes.
So we're circling all the way back now with the little bit of time we have left. I want to hear about this project that you're terrified of, that you're working on now, if you want. And it's okay if it's like, you know, you're not there yet, because I have other questions as well.
Organized, Tom.
That's my job.
Yeah, but like if I could keep track of the conversation as well as you did, then my conversation was actually probably pretty short. So
I appreciate it.
But
I want to know like what. So you know, this is your next big thing since Friday, and I want to know what it is.
Yeah, sort of. I've been, I don't know. I'm writing a lot right now, so there's a lot of different things going on, but this is just something called the freshman film. It's like a project that we do as our first film going into school, and so I'm on like draft 2 of a script, so I don't know if there's a lot that I'm willing to say because it's all subject to change tomorrow, but hopefully they have these amazing resources here, like all of these different sound stages and stuff, so I'm really excited to kind of just play with space, and I don't think this is going to change my drafts, but I'm mainly centering this story about like an artist, like a painter. So I'm hoping to kind of experiment a lot with like paint and color and yeah, I don't know, just kind of like a lot of abstract visual stuff to go with a story. So it's so early, it's ridiculous.
That's fair, but I think it's exciting to hear that, because I don't know that would be a way that I would describe your work thus far. And so that's like, that makes sense. That's the perfect evolution. Like now let's go into this like very visual sort of artsy, experimental.
Well, we're not allowed to have any dialogue this year. So that's been like the hardest thing for me, because the thing I love doing is writing dialogue, and we're not allowed to have any in our first year as film students here. So I've just been trying to tackle this assignment the best I can, but there's so many kids around me who have like presented their scripts or like asked me to read them that are so spot on of what they're doing that I'm like, oh God, I hope that I hope the mine comes through. But we'll see.
So I'm the rare bird, I guess, that like people memorize movies and they know every line of dialogue. I can't do that. I've never done that. I feel like there are obviously lines that stand out and stuff, and I'm sure there are exceptions, but to anything I could say. But for the most part, I don't really remember dialogue from movies. I remember the images. And that's my favorite part. Like when I mentioned the flag in Friday, right? Like there's a great dialogue, and I use the dialogue from the film in my lesson plans, but it's the images that really drop me to my knees, right? I mean, the one shot where you just see the doors, the stairs and the doors is like, and we could go on and on about that, so I won't. But that's why I love the medium, because there's, all the tone builds up to these visual moments of impact. And a lot of times, this is like a weird habit of mine, I watch films without sound, right? And I started doing this because I wanted to judge our cinematography award based solely on what I see and not let anything else influence me. So I watch all the films with the sound, and then when it's like the judging part for the cinematography nominees, I really just look. And I think about how they communicate.
You're so dedicated, Tom. Like that's so amazing that you do that. Like I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of festivals in terms of student work. Forgive me for interrupting you, but I would like to give you some credit for 2 seconds because you've been making me blush the entire time. There's so many festivals that like with student work are just like, oh, we're going to have like a student category and it's very cute that you guys did this and thanks for coming. And I just like it just means so much that, I almost don't, because I'm a kid, like, and I'm sure that this goes for a lot of other people. Like I almost don't expect that much detail to be noticed by people at film festivals, because it's like, oh, well, I'm not important enough for people to like, or this film isn't like important enough yet for people to like really take the time, but like they'll watch it on the surface level, and if they enjoy it, it'll get it or something like that. So just to hear that you do that is like such I really, kudos to you, man. Like seriously, it's really, I'm grateful to hear it, because it really means that a lot of our hard work is paying off. And so it's part of why I encourage people to submit too, is because I'm like, not only should you submit because it's a great experience, but like, this is, now it sounds like I'm like being paid by All American, but I'm so
check is in the mail.
Exactly. Yeah. But I'm so serious about it, just that like, yeah, it's like, not only will you get to, meet so many amazing creative people. I've already been in touch with so many people that I met there there's so many filmmakers there that just blew my mind. But not only do you get to meet great people, but the thing that I'm trying to build to is like, your work is so appreciated and noticed, and like your hard work pays off to a degree that like I had never experienced before. Wow. So it was really gratifying, especially now that you know how crazy for the journey of Friday was, to get there and see like, and it just means a lot that you take that much time. So
I appreciate it. Look,
yeah, seriously.
When I was, designing this dream, that it was there were many inspirations, obviously, so many young people that I was encountering, being interested, filmmaking, visual storytelling, becoming the medium of our artistic medium of our time, so many different layers to it. But one of the biggest was that it was an afterthought. And I was fortunate enough to work with young people, and, I didn't look at age, I looked at passion. And the passion is almost stronger when you're young, right? And I just was so inspired and motivated and it just absolutely devastated me that there wasn't a platform to elevate and take seriously. Because why not invest in this just as much as in something in Hollywood, if not more? Because think about the impact you can have that will only make it better, right? And that, I want resources, I want development, because everyone has room to improve. And I think the investment part is, just sort of part of my nature. I couldn't do it any other way, but also because I really believe, and I believe that we're building something special, that this community has long-standing power to really, there's like, we're 10 years in, and some of the filmmakers I'm interviewing, like you won last year. Well, 2 days ago, I interviewed Stephen Boyer, who won our first year. 10 years ago.
Wow.
And he's 25 and he's doing like legit paid commercial work and like his journey. And there's so much to be given back there that if I don't invest, legitimately, then that will never happen. Plus I just like it. I mean, I love watching.
We're so lucky that you do.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Well, I'm a rare bird. What can I say? So with that said, if you're looking for some inspiration for this new project, this sort of visual journey with no dialogue, there may be something to watching, like muting everything you watch for a few weeks. I found it like incredible how you can communicate strictly through imagery. I'm going to stay organized here. So whatever it is that you're making, I certainly hope that you will keep me in the loop. I'm excited to see what's next.
Absolutely.
I'm happy to know that you're doing well. So
you too, Tom.
How do we now take your experiences? And I know you're still sort of, baby stepping your way into this world, but you've had a lot of success 100%. With us. And I think, people are going to look at your film first for 2021, right? Because it's like, well, what was the big winner, right? That's the way it works. So this is going to be a show that a lot of people want to listen to. It's important for you to give back. Like I was just saying, what do you wish you knew now? And I know you're just removed from high school, but like, what have you learned along the way that if you could speak to yourself, in 7th grade, in 9th grade, and 10th grade about what you've learned about making movies, what would you tell your younger self?
I think I'm laughing because I was about to say just do it, which is the most cliche thing that anyone could ever say. But I think the thing that I'm thinking is like, I think I've always had sort of like sometimes it pays off and sometimes it's awkward, but like this ambition thing that's like, I'm gonna make this thing and it's gonna be like a big quality and we're really gonna try and get this done. And sometimes it falls on its face and sometimes it works out. But I really would encourage my younger self and younger filmmakers, even though I'm such a beginner, it's ridiculous. There was a festival where I was put on a panel, I think by accident, by the way. But I was put on.
There's another Hudson Flynn who was like 52.
Exactly. But I was put on a panel and they were like, "What's your advice for beginners?" And the microphone got to me and I was like, "Look at me, like please do not ask me this question." But I think the thing that I would say to like, especially kids who are going to All American, kids my age, is. We're so lucky to be surrounded by as many resources as we are. Like there's just so many things around us that are so helpful to what we want to do now that our parents and grandparents wish they had at their fingertips. Like I am. Oh, my Mac has low battery. Okay, sorry. Now I'm nervous. My computer's gonna.
We're good. We got this.
Okay. Yeah, I think, there's so many different ways to make your film an even better quality than you think you can. Whether it's like how you want to edit it or what kind of, there's a bunch of free editing softwares that are better than just what you have of like iMovie, or there's a lot of different hidden things in iMovie that are super helpful. I've been preaching the gospel of iMovie forever. I don't edit on it anymore, but it has gotten so damn good that if people are upset that all they have to use is iMovie, they're so lucky to have iMovie.
Make the most of what you have, right?
Seriously, make the most of what you have. Like there's like backstage.com. You can, the amount of times that I have been so surprised to see full-grown adults just show up to be a part of something because I put an ad out on Backstage. Like the world seriously is our oyster right now. Just in the fact that we have all of these things around us. Like so if you go the extra mile, it's not actually that hard to go the extra mile because all you have to do is spend like 10 minutes looking up an alternative and it's there. Or like there's so much outstanding royalty-free music. I will plug one right now, ashandspencer.com. ashandspencer.com. It has a whole grid of emotions you can click on to show you different royalty-free music. It is outstanding, and you can, as long as you're not like using it in commercial things, you can have it all for free. And I've been using that since middle school. It is one of the greatest things ever, and I don't know why more people don't use it. but like things like this are so helpful.
Yep.
And so, I'd say really utilize everything around you. And if you don't think that you have that resource, look harder, because I promise you there's something there.
Right. Find a way to fight through the pandemic and finish your movie, I mean.
100%. Yeah.
So, all right, sadly, we have to end somewhere. And so my habit has been to end with just anything that's on your playlist or radar right now. Obviously, a film that you watched recently that really spoke to you, that someone might want to check out. It doesn't have to be a film. It could be music, something that's inspiring you right now besides the book on your bedside table, which just happens to be Catcher in the Rye.
I think, I've really gotten into Succession. That show sort of blew my mind. Just the way that it's written and the performances on that show are outstanding. A thing that I recently watched that I've been encouraging everybody to watch is Aziz Ansari has a new stand-up special, and it's just a 30-minute. It's 30 minutes long. It's like it takes no time out of your day to watch it, but like, it's such a wake-up call to so much that's happening right now. Like a calm wake-up call. There's a lot of stand-up specials that'll like yell at you. And this is just kind of a really interesting 30 minutes where he's really funny and he kind of just tells you to wake up and look around you a little bit. And I'm very grateful that I watched it, and you should too. I think it's called Nightclub Comedian. He just went to the Comedy Cellar and did a 30-minute set, and that was it. But it's on Netflix and it's fantastic. So I would highly encourage you to watch that.
I love it. And that's just like light and fluffy, and I don't have to worry about analyzing cinematic techniques and all of these things. So I really appreciate that one. It's funny.
Oh, wait, sorry. Can I do one more?
No,
sorry.
That's it. No, go ahead.
I recently watched Memories of Murder, which is a Bong Joon-ho movie from 2003. And that was just so good. It's either Memories of Murder or Memories of a Murderer. I think if you look up either, it'll come up because the Korean translation is sort of different each time. But it's really, really fantastic. Bong Joon-ho, who did Parasite, directed it, and it's outstanding. So I'd highly recommend that.
An incomparable talent on like every level.
His detail is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's insane. Okay, so thank you for those recommendations. I as you're saying it, like recommending a comedy show, I'm like, man, we didn't even get into how funny you are and what that process is like. But you know what? We will just have to have round 2 at some point soon.
I'd love that, yeah.
So thank you, Hudson, for the insightful glimpse into your experiences and motivations as a storyteller. I encourage all of you to check out Hudson's work. Links are in the description. And of course, thanks to all of you for tuning in and joining us. I remind you that this is just one of many in-depth conversations with the future of film. Go to hsfilmfest.com for more information on the All-American High School Film Festival. And please do us a favor and subscribe and share across all platforms to support our important community of artists just like Hudson. We will see you next time. Hudson, it's been an absolute pleasure, my man.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Go submit to All American. It's so great.